This is George Newbern, the voice of Superman, and you're listening to the DCAU Review, hosted by Cal and Liam, streaming at DCAUreview.com and on your favorite podcast app.
There is an alien among us. A superior being from a place called Krypton. Deep in the heart of the city, he watches for signs of danger. Ready to act on a moment's notice. His true name is Kal-El. You know him as Superman.
Maybe you ladies haven't heard about me.
The future of Metropolis is in the hands of the Man of Steel. Get up!
Superman.
Get up.
He's gonna be busy.
I said get up.
Superman.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 235 of the DCAU Review. I am one of your hosts, Cal. With me, my good friend, good brother, the man that runs our Twitter account. Well, as of now, anyway. It's Liam. Liam. I don't say that ominously like I'm going to subvert your power. I'm just saying that if Twitter still exists, if this is 50 years in the future, whenever now is, and Twitter is no longer a website, then Liam doesn't run our Twitter account. So, not commenting on current events here. We need to make this thing evergreen. Sorry, Liam. We are continuing here in the month of November as we continue covering what is left of the Superman the Animated Series material that we have. And because of our limited time remaining here in the sunny skies of Metropolis, we're doing something a little different than we haven't done before with this week's review.
That is right. So as folks will no doubt remember, in the past, anytime we had a two-part or three-part, in some case, adventure, we have always reviewed them together and kind of give one uniform score for the overall story, the plot, the visuals, the music, and the voice acting for all parts. And we will still keep with that. There's only going to be one score when all is said and done. But our coverage of this two-part episode in question will be split over 2 weeks. So we will just be talking this week about part one of Blasts from the Past. That's blasts with an S.
Right, not a single blast. Although it could be argued that this episode was a single blast from the past. But we digress. But yes, Liam, I'm excited to review part one of this week. And then, as you mentioned, we will get to part two in next week's episode, which will give us a little bit of a time to sort of stop and smell the roses, something we may feel rushed at times to do to get through a two-parter. So trying something new, give us some feedback on social medias based on how you like us breaking down this two-parter. And perhaps in the future, we will do the same. Give some dedicated time to each individual episode. But speaking of this week's episode, part one, Liam, we will get into our official IMDb synopsis for this week's episode, which originally aired here in the United States on the Kids WB back on September the 8th, 1997, meaning we just passed the 25-year anniversary of this episode's debut. And of course, the official IMDb synopsis is brought to you by the Pod Tower. Head over to youtube.com/the Pod Tower and subscribe today. And not only will you get our entire catalog of episodes, including bonus episodes and prior episodes, including all of our Superman the Animated Series coverage, but you also get some great content from other DCAU content creators. Liam, hit us with that IMDb synopsis.
That's right. So this is the synopsis for Blasts from the Past, part one, which was written by Robert Goodman, directed by Dan Reba, with music by Kristopher Carter and animation by Coco and Dong Yang. And that synopsis reads as such. Upon discovery of the Phantom Zone projector in his ship, Superman makes contact with and releases a prisoner whose sentence is completed.
Mm. Okay, there's some odd wording in there, a couple different places, but it I guess it's okay.
Yeah, I mean it's not factually incorrect,
Right.
but it leaves something to be desired here, both in word structure and detail.
Yeah, well, that I guess will get us started here with our official synopsis of the episode, and we open things up with Professor Hamilton, Emil Hamilton, as we talked about, arguably the best, maybe definitely top 5, if not top 1, tans in all of the DCAU here. The man just is out in the sun all day, every day. Whenever he doesn't have that long white lab coat on, he just must be out on the beaches of Metropolis just tanning, because that man has a beautiful tan.
I think it's between him and pre-Two-Face Harvey Dent, right? Like
throw Lex Luthor,
maybe Lex. Yeah.
Yep. Those characters who are racially ambiguous, I think is the term that Bruce Timm used on one of the accompanying tracks for the episodes there. But yes, so we have Emil Hamilton working on Superman's ship. Superman arrives and offers to lend a hand, but I love this little bit. Emil Hamilton is, despite having literally the strongest being on Earth at his disposal there, insists that he's going to try and open this compartment that seems to be jammed, and he's able to get it open, and inside lurks a mysterious looking device, and we come to learn that this is in fact the Phantom Zone projector, as they begin sort of taking a look at it and beginning to dissect just what this contraption is.
There seems to be a compartment in here that I haven't noticed before. I think you'll find this very interesting. The Phantom Zone. Believe it or not, we're looking through to another dimension. Incredible. I saw this in Brainiac's orb. On Krypton, this is where they imprison dangerous aliens. Amazing. I do wish the image were clearer. Oh dear.
They see that there's a viewfinder that you can look through, and they begin to see these fantastical creatures and different beings moving about. And Superman gives us a little bit of dialogue. We have heard the Phantom Zone mentioned a couple of times, I believe, before, including in The Last Son of Krypton. Jor-El mentions it in passing as an option to try and save the entire planet. They were going to move everybody to the Phantom Zone, and then I guess launch the rocket off of Krypton, and then kind of relocate everybody out of the Phantom Zone. But of course, we know how that went. So we've gotten some mentions, and Superman seems to be very up to speed on what this is. That it's a different dimension, and there are beings that are trapped into that Phantom Zone. I think he refers to it as the worst creatures, or the most dangerous creatures on Krypton are captured and kept there. And as Professor Hamilton, who he really is the fool a little bit in this episode, is he decides he's just going to start pressing buttons. What's the worst that could happen? You just start twisting knobs and pressing buttons, and wouldn't you know, he inadvertently releases a crab, lobster, praying mantis, salamander thing. Yes, fish thing that is twice the size of the building that they're in, and breaks out and goes on the loose, much to his chagrin. Superman quickly jumps into action, and as the creature remarkably has the power of flight immediately, is able to fly, which makes me wonder, could this creature fly on Krypton? could this maybe this just had built-in flight, because he had 0 sun exposure and he's flying around and no trouble flying at all, flies directly towards Metropolis. Superman races into action and is able to, thankfully with the help of a telephone pole, swing and bat this creature back towards Star Labs, where it lands safely just in time for Superman to subdue it enough for Professor Hamilton to untwist the knobs and send this creature back to the Phantom Zone.
Hurry, Professor! Whenever you turned last time, turn it the other way. You okay?
Yes. Just making a mental note to label that knob.
And
They really built that machine on like the Star Wars method. Like nothing has a label. There's not even like it's not like there's Kryptonian writing.
Nope.
That Professor Hamilton can't read. It's just 3 yellow knobs.
And if you you can twist them all, and maybe they interact with each other, and that's how you release things. It's not very clear, because at one point Professor Hamilton's just twisting all of them in different directions, like an old-fashioned television. But yes, they thankfully are able to subdue and get the creature sent back to the zone. But as they are looking through the viewfinder, they see a human form, or at least a Kryptonian human form, float by, and she begins calling out, demanding to see the council, and wondering who's there, and demanding to see them, demanding to be released, that she served her sentence. And demands at one point to see Jor-El, even, that he would know exactly what's going on.
Help me! Please! Release me! I served my sentence! Where is the council?
Hello?
Have you come to release me?
Who are you?
Mala! Where is the council?
The council isn't here. My name is Kal-El.
Kal-El? Please, bring Jor-El. He will know.
Jor-El, wasn't that your father?
Yes.
Help, please.
And Kal-El, aka Superman, introduces himself and tries to get more information out of her so he can head back to the old Fortress of Solitude and get some answers from Brainiac.
That's right. And we do get a pretty lovely flashback sequence to Krypton, where we are informed that Mala is the second in command of this Kryptonian general.
Welcome to Krypton.
Tell me about Mala.
One moment, please. Mala, at the peak of her career, was second in command of planetary defenses, answering only to the High General himself, Jax-Ur.
And when our defenses have been diminished to a pitiful strike force, who will save Krypton from its enemies?
Jax-Ur and Mala, brilliant warriors each, stood together in service to the Council for years, until the thirst for power corrupted Jax-Ur's mind.
The Council has grown weak. Krypton needs a strong leader to reclaim its former greatness, and I am that leader. Together, we will usher in a new age of strength and order for all.
Not Zod, but Jax-Ur, who's sort of another famous Kryptonian rogue from the comics. He was more of like an evil scientist, kind of like a mirror reflection of Jor-El in the comics. But here they've sort of taken the name and I guess his leadership of this faction of people, and then sort of combined him with the more broader strength through power General Zod motif that we get in depictions of that character, and kind of smushed them into one, as would often happen, I think, with DCAU versions of certain characters. will sometimes take on aspects of other similar characters there. So that sort of exists here as we hear a pretty arousing speech from Jaxer in the past. It's sort of noted that he and Mala were the leader and second in command, respectively, of the Kryptonian army, and that they were great warriors who served the Kryptonian Council for years. But as time went on, Jaxer had a certain lust for power. And stop me if you've heard this before, folks. He is a leader who says that the current regime is going to reduce military power down to a small strike force, and then asks, how will Krypton defend itself from its enemies? Nothing, no real world counterparts. He also promises that he can that Krypton needs a strong leader to help it reclaim its former greatness, and that he will restore strength and order.
You know, people say The Simpsons predicted the future really well. Without naming names here, I mean, this is a little spot on. And if that's not the end. Like the next part, the man leads what is literally referred to as an insurrection.
He sure does. Yeah, it's a little on the nose. So that is in fact what happened. He promises to restore strength and order, and then leads a coup attempt, which is foiled by Jor-El and some other allies of the council, and it is noted that in the aftermath, Jaxer and all of his followers are arrested, with Jaxer and Mala being sent to the Phantom Zone, though it's noted that Jaxer alone takes responsibility for planning the coup. So there's one difference here. And so he is sentenced to life in the Phantom Zone, whereas Mala is given a mere 20 years. So with that knowledge in hand, it's also noted, by the way, that the council took pity on Mala as they found that she was, and I quote, just following orders. It's not a subtle scene. I'll just say that.
If this had been written in 2022, there would be a large outcry of people claiming that this was woke garbage. I'm just gonna say that. And right or wrong, I'm just saying that there would definitely be a portion of people saying that this was woke garbage.
Oh yeah. This would be, there'd be 1,000 YouTube videos with like this scene and red circles and arrows and a guy making an angry. It would be like there'd be an entire cottage industry of reactionary YouTubers based off of this one scene if it was created today. But anyway, based on the knowledge that Mala has served her sentence and ultimately seems to be at least a little bit contrite, a little bit willing to respect the rule of law going forward, Superman and Professor Hamilton reunite and decide to let her out. And it's very quickly established that things are a bit overwhelming for her, as she's very quickly notices that she's not on Krypton and sort of has to be made aware by Superman and Professor Hamilton that Krypton has been destroyed and that things are going to be different here. As talk about like just a random location change. Superman notes that he's going to need a place for Mala to stay, and so Professor Hamilton offers up the Star Labs cabin.
Of course, the retreat. It's where all they got to have get-togethers, and the professors got to discuss and figure things out. But they can't do so while they're in their stuffy lab coats and they're with their computers and their nerdy stuff around. They got to get out into the great outdoors. Green grass and wood and trees and stuff.
You think Hamilton's out there chopping wood? He's
definitely. It's how he gets
getting
that
the fire going.
That's right. He's getting that tan out there, chopping down trees and doing manly outdoor stuff.
I really like this picture we're painting of Professor Hamilton, ostensibly like the most boring character in this series until Justice League.
Yep.
And now he's like
he's
like a surfer dude and an outdoorsman.
He's the epitome of masculinity. He's just out there just like shirtless chopping down trees, and then on the weekends he's at the beach just like picking up chicks like this is what happens when you give us more time to discuss a plot. So maybe if you don't like this goofiness, you're gonna vote down for breaking down two-parters into one-parter or into multiple episodes.
We would definitely not have time for extended Professor Hamilton riffs if we had another part to talk about here. But yeah, so Superman takes Mala to the retreat and sort of helps her. We see sort of a brief montage of her testing out and sort of learning her new powers that she's getting under this yellow sun, from the heat vision to her super strength. And
it's like a Rocky training montage, except it's a Kryptonian getting powers.
Pretty much, yeah. Which Rocky movie had the one set in the woods? Is that 4?
Maybe that's it. That I think that's one of the few that I haven't seen the entirety of. So that sounds right. It's not any of the early ones, because those were in meat lockers and running the steps in Philadelphia. Right. So, yeah.
Anywho, so many riffs.
Yeah, we got
so many diatribes.
Yep.
But so we then see that Superman decides that he thinks Mala is ready for a night out on the town on patrol with him, and they come across a group of bank robbers, and Superman and Mala kind of split up to deal with them, with Superman going to chase down a car that's speeding away. Mala tracks down 2 that sort of went in the other direction, and it becomes very clear here that despite Mala's lip service to the contrary, that some of those fascist ideals about strength and order have not left her, despite the 20 years in the Phantom Zone.
You want to return what you stole?
Yeah, just put me down, please.
Beg me.
I'm begging you, please.
Mala, put him down.
No!
This one's confessed and promised restitution.
But Mala, you can't...
Whoa! Did Superman do this?
What's with the woman?
Are these Earth troops?
Sort of.
I am Mala, Superman's second in command. I offer you my promise to this world that I will follow in Superman's tradition of just rule with a fair hand.
I thought I was career-minded.
Yeah, it's almost immediate. I could probably save this to the end where we're talking about the plot, but I'll just interject here because we have the time. I love that Superman's heart here, his kindness, and recognizing like the justice part of truth, justice in the American way, or truth, justice, and whatever the 2022 version is of that. Like
a better tomorrow.
Okay. So I love that justice part is he sees that Mala was sentenced for 20 years. She's in this torturous alternate dimension. He recognizes it's going to be a risk because she was clearly put in there because she was a dangerous criminal, but she's also served her time. He wants to give her a chance. He wants to give her an opportunity to redeem herself and be like him. They don't really go into it, his sort of maybe deeper motives, but perhaps having an ally, Of course, we get into it here shortly. Is he interested? It doesn't seem to be really interested in her romantically, but having another Kryptonian around, no longer being the last surviving being of Krypton, could be a motivation here for him. So I love that, but it also has this naive edge to it, because he immediately lets her on her first night out decide to fight crime on her own. Essentially, he, without supervision, he just leaves her on her own to take care of these two thugs. And that was after her not so subtly remarking to Professor Hamilton that she basically could crush him, and that everybody else was a weakling on Earth, and she and Superman were the two strongest beings. So it's a little bit naive of Superman to think that something wouldn't go wrong here as she zooms into action by herself. I will say that.
For sure. Yeah, so she roughs up the criminals, probably much worse than Superman would, but she appears to be further threatening one of the criminals. Superman returns to the scene and sort of talks her down, and at which point not only the cops but Lois Lane show up to see sort of the aftermath of the brutality, and she informs the cops and in fact the press, by virtue of Lois being there, that she plans to follow in Superman's footsteps and rule with kindness.
Yep. A just rule with a fair hand, she says.
It is. We'll get into voice acting a little bit. It's a very funny scene. Yep. It's so the reaction to that, again, a statement causing something of a local media firestorm, as we find out, as that troublemaker Angela Chen is on the newscast. We see Mala watching, I guess, the next day. And she informs us that while some people are excited at the prospect of a new superhero in town, some are a little bit more leery of the fact of what she said and what her quote to the press was. As we see Lex Luthor holding, I guess, some kind of rally, like an anti-Superman rally.
Mala Mania has even hit Metropolis mogul Lex Luthor, who had this to say about the ex-con from Krypton.
Now the truth comes out. Superman and this woman fancy themselves our rulers. No doubt they plan to populate the Earth with Kryptonians, reducing us to slaves or pets.
An enticing notion.
If Superman really cares about the human race, he should send this criminal back to where he found her, to that Phantom Zone dimension.
I'm never going back! Never!
Where he talks how he's acting like the shoe is finally on the other foot. Superman plans to rule the world, and he's brought Mala here so that they can populate the world with Kryptonians and overrun the rest of us. Again, no real world parallels. Getting on TV and yelling about how a group of people are going to change the population and overrun another group of people. There are no parallels here.
No, not at all. Not at all. Couldn't pick one out if you tried. But
predictably, this makes Mala very angry as she destroys the TV, and of course the last thing that really sets her off is that Lex declares that Superman should return her to the Phantom Zone, which sets her off, and she heads back to Star Labs to find Superman and Hamilton, who happen to be having a conversation about just that exact topic.
All right, nitpick time. Superman, Liam. Superman, well-known set of superpowers, right? Super strength, can fly, heat vision, depending on the interpretation, has that freeze breath thing. Pretty well-known X-ray vision. Didn't mention that one. Heat vision. Super hearing. That's a pretty well-known power of his. He's Superman. He knows he has it. There is another Kryptonian within human earshot of him in this same facility, and he is openly talking about discussing strategy with Professor Hamilton, where if she doesn't shape up, he's going to have to send her back to the Phantom Zone. My man, what we couldn't write this or type this out on a computer screen and send it via email, or just like write it down and like point to the sign, like and like gesture to be quiet to Professor Hamilton here. Like what are we thinking here? So yeah, of course he says this out loud, and after Mala has just burned and blown up her own television, screaming, "I'm never going back to the Phantom Zone," she overhears this conversation between Superman and Professor Hamilton, where he's disappointed. Now, he does go out of his way to say that she needs to do some damage control, and Professor Hamilton asks if she can, if the damage is irreparable at this point, and Superman isn't sure. But Superman declares that they're going to go talk to the press and try and clean some things up a little bit here. But in the meantime, mentions that if she doesn't shape up, he requests that the professor have the Phantom Zone ready just in case. And of course, they walk right past her. Somehow the man with X-ray vision and super hearing didn't see or hear a Amazonian woman just lurking behind this wall here, but okay. And she decides, sort of not so subtly at this point, that she's going to she's pretty much at her wit's end. She's pretty much done with this whole thing. But they go. She decides she's going to speak to Lois Lane, so they meet with Lois on, and Lois begins asking her some questions. There's some good, funny Lois bits here, but she basically tries. Mala tries to clear things up and say that she's not looking to rule. She misunderstood Superman's place, and Lois doesn't believe her, which is great. And then so Lois then throws a question at her if they're more than just superhero partners, if they do plan on having a romantic relationship together. And there's that awkward moment that always happens in the movie where the male friend says no, but she says yes, and there's this awkwardness between the two of them. So Mala's not too happy, and she is letting her feelings known very openly. Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned, and all that stuff. Well, she's not happy that she has been her affection has been turned down. Superman insists that they're just going to be friends. But in the meantime, he sort of lets slip, based on his longing gaze towards Lois, that Lois may be the object of his affection. So Mala lunges at Lois, grabs her by the throat, and that's the last straw for Superman, as he breaks in and hurls Mala across the highway. And there's some fighting that occurs. He gets her in a headlock and begins flying her, assume back towards Star Labs, so that he can hopefully return her to the Phantom Zone. But in the meantime, she gets out of this headlock pretty easily and hurls him through a restaurant that's sort of shaped like the Space Needle. And there's, of course, damage that's done. Superman must save the Space Needle restaurant from collapsing and falling. And in the meantime, Mala gets away. Superman rushes back to Star Labs, where he unfortunately encounters a Professor Hamilton laying motionless on the ground. He was able to revive him, but the professor mentions that Mala was there and she took the projector. And we flash to Mala alone, I guess, back by the cabin again. That's her home base at this point. Mm-hmm. Releasing Jaxer, who we saw in the Brainiac flashbacks before, from the Phantom Zone. And as he is released, she promises that he's going to quite like their new home. And that is where our to be continued populates on the screen as we end this week's part 1.
That's right. So I guess we can get into our scores here now that we've completed the recap. So it's funny because what we said, like we kind of mentioned this at the top of the show, but we're at the end of the next week's review, we will have one score for both episodes. We're not going to do a score for this one, just because, again, for every other 2 or 3 part episode we've ever done. We've always scored them together, but we'll have sort of our where we are at the end. We're going to give a plot score like normal, a score for each category like normal,
not a final score.
Right, it's our midway point. It's our halfway through the semester grading, and we'll see if the points go up or down by the end of next week. But yeah, here as we get to our plot score, I think it's fun because everything a bit more time to breathe, because we're not trying to get it over in 22 minutes. Or in this case, like this one's actually shorter. This one was 19 minutes, so they have even less time than normal. I don't know if something was cut because like it just didn't work, or if there was a standards and practices thing that got it cut at the last minute. I don't know any reason, but this one is a couple minutes shorter than other episodes. So but that being said, because they're not trying to wrap up the whole story, you get time to build all of these characters. You get to know, you get more than like 15 seconds for a flashback of who Jaxer and Mala are, and you see how they sort of have an intrinsic hate of Jor-El, which will pay off when Jaxer and Mala and Superman come to blows in part 2, certainly. So I appreciate that. And then you get to see a little bit more of who Mala is, because I think, again, we'll see next week, maybe I'm wrong, but she kind of just becomes the second in command, much in the same way that like the Ursa character or the Feora character, as they are used, usually play the second in command to Zod in the various live action movies and TV things that they've been in. So it's kind of fun to see her come out first and kind of get her own little adventure, and you learn about her and sort of what her views are, and sort of the way that she is just clearly has a in more than one word, a lust for, because while she apparently had some sort of romantic relationship with Jaxer, she's also very willing to let Superman fill that role. If things had gone a different way in this episode. So it's like you get to know more about like what makes her a psycho in a way that maybe she wouldn't have time to if you brought them both out at the same time. So I kind of like that we had this first part with it just being Mala, and just kind of letting the dread of, oh, this is definitely going to go south, build almost until the end of the episode, where they do finally come to blows, but then just kind of leaving us with the to be continued of, oh no, it's going to get even worse because now other guy. I think that's a pretty good cliffhanger there.
Yeah, I think it's fine. I think so I scored my initial score here, again, going to be updated after we see part 2, but initial scoring here on plot I gave was a 6. I think there are some interesting things here. I think this would have worked a little bit better if this Superman wasn't such a weakling at times. I think if it didn't, I mean, and we've talked about before, like it's tough to make a Superman show where Superman feels like he's in any peril unless you sort of make him a weaker version of the character. If he's impervious to everything, if he's overpowered, it's not going to be interesting. So you have to create tension and wonder whether or not Superman is going to be able to defeat, the giant robot dinosaur or the giant robot rubber duck, or what other giant robots did he fight? The giant gorilla, the giant ape, whatever it was, not a robot, but ape. So yeah, there has to be some tension there. So, but with that, you finally have somebody that's sort of Superman's equal here. There's the hope, like, is this character going to be an ally for Superman? Is this someone that he can trust? Have they turned over a new leaf? I don't think it breathes enough for you to really get the idea that this character has anything that's redeemable. It's very quick to make her out to be somebody that is not a good Kryptonian. Like she's not good. She immediately like blows her chance. She immediately has this undercurrent, which is okay. But I think that in some ways that makes Superman's decision to put her on her own and to trust her feel a little bit naive, which I don't like Superman. I love that his heart, his good heart sometimes can blind him to some of those things. Like he wants to see the good in people. He wants to see the good that this person has been given a chance at, 20 plus years being in the Phantom Zone. Maybe she has turned over a new leaf. Maybe she wasn't the mastermind behind this insurrection attempt. So maybe she really was just following orders. Maybe he'll be able to give her better direction and kind of lead her. I can fix her is what Superman's brain says. But unfortunately here, it's very obvious from the beginning that she's sort of a loose cannon. And because she's a Kryptonian powered individual, it feels a little too naive for Superman and almost like he's just being dumb, which I don't like. It's a fine line. I just think it's a fine line there. So, there's some fun stuff. I think there's some good comedy here, some subtle comedy that comes about when, especially during the Lois interview. The accidental real world parallels were a little bit distracting, but also, made me chuckle a little bit. So, it's not unenjoyable. I think we did mention last week, this is one of those episodes that felt like it was in heavy rotation, or maybe, we just saw it so many times that first couple seasons that they played it that I kind of knew the beats to this episode, without having seen this in several years. So yeah, I'm interested to see with what part 2 brings next week and going through it with a fine tooth comb, if this brings the score up at all. But yeah, 6 out of 10 was my where I landed for this week.
Yeah, I think right now I'm sitting at a 7, so not far off from you. I think it's, like I said, I think I just think the fun dynamic of yes, and I think you can argue that maybe it definitely borders on Superman being naive or stupid by letting her off on her own devices, letting her kind of live by herself, and then and all of that, and then letting her go after those criminals by herself. I think you do run the risk there. But I guess I looked at the glass half full side of it a little bit more, or tried to at least, and just saw he wanting to see the best in people as he always does, letting her out. But I think, and again, we see in the scenes with him talking to Hamilton, and then him sort of setting up this chance with Lois, where he is kind of expecting it to go south there, but maybe he should have been more openly skeptical from the start, rather than kind of being very gung-ho about having her go on patrol with him a couple days after she got out of the Phantom Zone. So, but yeah, like I think the stuff I enjoyed, other than, as you mentioned, the sort of the comedy of the just the really on the nose modern day political parallels are I think it made me think I've only really ever thought of Mala as like the other Kryptonian character in this episode, but I think just watching this one, you're like, oh yeah, okay, she's got a little bit of an arc here herself, where it's clear that she's what she wants more than anything is to be she wants to be in the passenger seat for whoever the most powerful guy in the room is. And I think that's like, okay, that's interesting. Like that's a little wrinkle that I feel like maybe I didn't pick up on when I last watched this, which it's definitely been a few years since I'd seen this one. So I appreciated that. And I'm not sure if I would have been able to pick up on that as much if we had watched both parts here.
There you go. I concur with that. I did like a little bit of breathing room for this week to sort of to digest this episode on its own. All right, Liam, let's move on to our next category, which is going to be animation and visuals. And I believe you said this was a Coco Dong Yang production, and it was directed by Dan Reba and written by Bob Goodman. What stood out for you as far as visuals and animation are concerned?
Well, we mentioned in the plot, the first thing that that comes up, I think, is that we get almost right to the action right away. Once the projector is found by Professor Hamilton, and this wild, wacky creature comes flying out of the Phantom Zone and starts flying all over the city, and Superman has to go chase him. I really like that design. I feel like I always just attribute the weird alien designs to Glenn Murakami. I'm not sure if if this was him as well, or if this was I don't know if this was Shane Glines or James Tucker, or some of the other people that worked on character designs on the show. But yeah, it's like part, like it's got a mouth like a catfish or something, and then it's got like kind of a kind of a lizardy tail to it, and then these kind of like insectoid legs. It's a really neat design. And then just Superman fighting a giant monster through the city, and the way he kind of subdues it by there's some guys working on a power line, and I guess it's functioning, and Superman just grabs it and rips it from the power lines. and then uses the pole to sort of knock it back like he's swinging a big baseball bat, and then he kind of uses it to pin the creature down while Hamilton sends it back to the Phantom Zone. I think that's pretty cool. The Phantom Zone effect, as far as like the white energy coming out of it, I don't really think that's anything to write home about. When we see sort of peer into the little viewer in the window into the Phantom Zone, I mean it's Kirby as heck in there, isn't it?
Oh my goodness, the crackle, the light source, the red light source on their faces. I love the first shot too, when Superman peers in and you get this very horrifying view of this unnamed creature, humanoid type character who's clearly screaming in agony and pain, and the camera just zooms in and it goes into the character's open mouth that's just screaming in pain. I loved that. I thought that was terrifying. Really good visual though. But yeah, it's clearly much more Kirby inspired, and I like it better than the Donner Films choice of making it the flattened diamond or whatever that was, the floating trapezoid, two-dimensional trapezoid shape. Not anything wrong with those Donner Films or how they chose to portray things, but I think that this just rings much truer for what this series needed. And that the visuals inside the Phantom Zone were definitely something that I had pointed out. So I love that the creatures are just floating there. We get more of the Phantom Zone, of course, coming up in part 2. Spoiler alert. But that was definitely something that stuck out for me as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And then from there, I mean, we see the designs of Jax-Ur and Mala. They kind of have this, I guess this is a prisoner uniform that they're in.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's hard to say because they have different sort of like military armor on in the flashbacks, but then when they're being sent into the Phantom Zone, they have these like green vests over these black leotards. I don't think either one of their designs is particularly strong. Jax-Ur has like the techie eye patch, which is kind of neat. But nothing. I didn't think their visual style was too impressive. But and we don't have a ton of action in the rest of the episode, other than, like we said, the brief training montage and Mala roughing up the two thugs. But then we do get that final action beat where she tries to kill Lois, and when Superman kind of finally springs into action, and then she tosses him into that as you said, kind of the Space Needle looking building with the restaurant and Superman. I really enjoyed that sequence a lot. Especially the way Superman kind of has to, he gets knocked into it, and it sort of the building sort of bends and falls over, and then the top of it where all the people are falls, and he has to catch it, and it's sort of, he's still falling even though he's catching it, and it's kind of slowing, and then you kind of pan down to the street and you see cars kind of braking and swerving to get out of the way, and you see Superman come down, and it looks like it's about to crash into it, and then finally you kind of cut to a close-up and you see him struggling, and then finally his arms start to move up, and then he flies back into the sky and puts it down. I thought that's a really, really fun sequence. Again, very evocative of the way you would see Superman struggle with things in the old Fleischer cartoons, where it's really like there's a lot of movement and grimacing to his face, and he's really it's not just that the thing is heavy, but it's probably like the architecture of it is awkward for him. So the way he kind of catches it, slows it down, and then pushes it back up and carries it back up, I think is a pretty fun sequence as well.
Yeah, I agree. That's the most, between that and the, as you mentioned, the first scene where he has to battle the flying slug monster lobster thing. I would say those were the most tense moments of the episode. We do get some remarkable violence where we see Mala grabbing Lois Lane and lifting her up by the throat. I thought that was pretty graphic, especially for this series. That was a big no-no, I remember, at least from Batman the Animated Series, for the standards and practices and what they would allow. You couldn't grab people by the throat. You couldn't do super violent things that could be mistakenly reenacted by children onto each other. So that was a big no-no, I know. But that was remarkably pretty violent, where she wraps her full hand around Lois's throat and begins lifting her up in that scene, where she's realizes that Lois is her competition for Superman's affections. And but then not only that, but then we get sort of some light, but some man on woman violence, which again I think is one of those things that you're not always going to see, and didn't see a lot of, for good reason. But with in this case, when you have two characters that are equally powered here, it's an opportunity for you to have that sort of intergender fighting going on there. So having Superman just gently hurl her across the room after she's grabbed Lois, which sort of is Superman's way of returning the favor. Is when they were training, he had Mala sort of run up and try and give a shoulder tackle, which she does, and launches Superman across the room, crashing into a brick fireplace in the Star Labs cabin. So so there's not a ton of action or tension that occurs in the action outside of those moments, I thought, where the creature's released in the first scene, and then that scene where he's rescuing the Space Needle restaurant. So I think the visuals are okay for this episode. I will say that this is definitely, you can tell whoever storyboarded this, this doesn't look like the TMS episode that we saw last week. Superman is noticeably smaller, a little less barrel chested, a little bit more square. I will say the color palette feels a little weird in this episode too. In the very early part of the episode, it feels very yellowed. It's very, even watching it on HBO Max, which is the HD remastered version of Superman the Animated Series, it just felt very discolored, and I'm not sure what that was all about. But that was a little bit distracting, and the palette seems to be inconsistent. Like Superman is pretty light skinned early on in the episode, and then later on he gets a tan. Like Superman gets super tan later on. Not sure if he was hanging out with the good professor on the beach or what happened, but his skin tone changes colors, and especially juxtaposed against Mala's skin tone, and it's just very, very inconsistent with the coloration. There was just something that I noticed, and there's one or two scenes where characters that didn't have whites of their eyes shown, you could tell there was a cut to maybe somebody else did the storyboarding for a surprise reaction or something like that. And both Professor Hamilton and Superman, who typically do not have the whites of their eyes showing, there's a cut to them being surprised, and they both have the whites of their eyes showing. So that stuck out to me in that. But I'm sitting right now at a 5 out of 10, just because I didn't think there was anything terribly interesting other than that slug creature at the beginning. What about you?
Yeah, I think I ended up settling on I'm at a 6 right now. I think, like I said, I think there's the beat with the alien, and then the Superman struggling with the to kind of save the building at the end there. I think those are definitely the high points, and I do like the getting to spend a little bit more time on Krypton and see these weird, like, stormtrooper outfits that and Jarrell somehow working it so that I don't know, you play some sort of signal through like an intercom system or something that delays them, and we get like the visualization of sound is always something that kind of cracks me up in these. So I kind of enjoyed that as well. And yeah, I think that that final bit there again, where you get across how 0 to 60 Mala is, and how vicious she can be, from how she treats Lois to how she kind of deals in the fight with Superman, and the way that Superman's like flying. He has like one of her arms pinned back, and he's got his other arm kind of around her neck, and he's trying to fly her to Star Labs, to the Phantom Zone, and the way she kind of kicks out of it and gets away, I think is a fun sequence as well. So the difference in like their super powered fighting styles, I think was kind of neat as well. So it's definitely some highlights, even if it seems like it wasn't the most spectacular action, at least not maybe what you would expect for the first like fully powered Kryptonian villain to showing up in the show.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. All right, Liam, let's move on to our next category, which is going to be music. I believe you mentioned at the top Kristopher Carter, responsible for this week's music. As far as musical notes are concerned, I will say that the music that accompanies, there's a couple of scenes that are just straight up music. So right when Professor Hamilton makes the gaffe and releases this giant creature to wreak havoc on Metropolis, we do get some interesting tension building music that includes flutes and strings and very orchestral. But it's definitely heightening the tension of the scene as Superman is rushing to prevent this giant creature that is now also seemingly having the powers bestowed to him by the yellow sun from destroying Krypton. So we get some music that accompanies that with some xylophone and strings, and just some good accompanying music there, and then the aforementioned montage of Mala getting to use her powers is there's no dialogue at all for a significant portion there, so we get this sort of whimsical fun. It's almost like it felt like it belonged in a musical or something like that, where you would just see characters walking about and dancing to the soundtrack as if they could hear it. Not that Superman and Mala or Professor Hamilton were dancing to the music, but that just the general feel of that, a very, very whimsical sort of Disney montage soundtrack sound alike there. So and then the music, I think, in the final scene as Superman comes upon Professor Hamilton laying down and seemingly injured, and sharing the news that Mala has taken the projector, and then the cut to her turning on the projector, releasing Jaxer, and then the ominous tone as she welcomes him to Earth and tells him that he's going to quite enjoy it as he sort of grins evilly towards her. The music sort of drawing to a halt here as it leaves us hanging for our second part here. I thought that was pretty strong too. What about any notes that I didn't cover that you picked up on?
No, I think you covered it. Yeah, I definitely. I guess I'll be curious to see if the music there played at the end when Mala and Jaxer, if that's like their theme, if that continues on into the music of next week. But I did note that as well. And then yeah, I like I said, we already talked about that sequence pretty much at length in visuals. But when he catches the top of the Space Needle, there's sort of this really dramatic dramatic moment, and the music kind of reflects that as it's coming down, and the music is kind of coming down melodically with him, and sort of getting more of the dun 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 as it looks like it's about to end in tragedy. And then right as the needle stops falling, and then you see Superman sort of rise back up into frame, you bring the Superman theme in there, which is just excellent use of that theme of Shirley Walker's Superman theme there. So yeah, I think that's good. I think some of the music in the Krypton flashback as well is quite fun as well. So right now I'm sitting at a 6. We'll see if it comes up a little bit more next week. But I did really enjoy the kind of the action beats of that final act, and then certainly that to be continued kind of sting is very good as well.
Yep, I gave it the same exact score, 6 out of 10. We'll see again if the music plays a bigger role, more important role, or there are more memorable moments next week. But it's a solid part one as far as the music that was scored there by Mr. Carter. Liam, let's move on to our final category of the day, which is going to be our voice acting. And while we do not have a large cast here, we do have some returning favorites, even get some Corey Burton this week. Let's talk a little bit about our voice acting.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, we do get a little bit of Corey Burton as the benign Alexa version of Brainiac. We also have again, just fun to note the person making the monster noises, because it almost always ends up being a voice actor who's done a lot of stuff, and in this case it was Jim Cummings, who is probably best known as the voice of Winnie the Pooh, doing the voice of our Phantom Zone monster here, the sounds of the Phantom Zone monster, which I thought was very fun. And then, otherwise, other than our two main villains, which we'll get to in a minute, we do have Victor Brandt as Emil Hamilton. And then, of course, he's there to first kind of cause trouble by playing with things he shouldn't be. But he's also sort of the one there to bounce dialogue and to do a little exposition about the Phantom Zone and about what should be done with Mala. So he kind of becomes, I guess this is a good episode as far as maybe helping to establish Hamilton as like a confidant for Superman a little bit more.
Yeah, I'd say so. I think it does certainly shed more light onto the relationship the two of them have, and Superman beginning to trust him a little bit more, and Superman even willing to sort of let him behind the curtain a little bit as to what he was thinking as he's sort of processing what's going on, allowing the professor to sort of pick his brain, and him bouncing ideas off the professor on what the strategy should be for dealing with her. So yeah, this is hashtag my Professor Hamilton, as we've discussed. That Joker that plays him, we have nothing but it's not because the performance is bad. It's just very different than what he's played as in Superman the Animated Series. But yes, it's very different once we get to Justice League Unlimited and that version of Professor Hamilton versus this one. This one's a lot warmer, a lot more gentle and kinder, I would say, than what he eventually turns into. But then again, it's a different character sort of when we get into Justice League Unlimited also, as we've talked about. It's
very true.
Professor's evil twin.
That's right. But and then we of course have our two villains of the piece. We have Ron Perlman as Jaxer, of course, a voice we've talked about many times on our show, voice of Clayface, voice of Slade and Teen Titans, and quite a few other voice acting roles to his credit. Hellboy himself here, minor role, but he's a hoot in that flashback sequence when he's given the speech to the troops, and then when he's yelling, he's kind of again very much filling the role that Zod usually fills in the movies when he's being sort of all yelly, shouty, and defiant about being sent to the Phantom Zone and demanding to see Jor-El and all of this stuff before he gets sent away. So that's fun, and we know there's more coming with him next week, certainly.
Yeah, it's a small portion here. It's mostly just him giving his speech to the Kryptonians that he's rallying around him. So I'm sure we'll get more next week, and then of course I still don't think this will be his defining role when it comes to the DCAU, but I could be wrong.
I'll have to wait and see. But yeah, this is a fun little taste of what we'll get. And of course, as mentioned, his right-hand woman and really the chief villain for part one here is Leslie Easterbrook playing Mala. Folks would know her from the Police Academy movies, as well as Laverne and Shirley. She had a recurring role on that show in the 80s. But it's funny because when she first starts talking, I was like, this is a little too like 80s cartoon voice for me. But the more sort of ridiculous and fashy she gets as it goes on, I'm like, actually, I think this kind of works. Like she gets like more pompous and sanctimonious as the episode goes on, culminating in probably both the narrative and maybe the comedic highlight of the episode, which is her interaction with, of course, Dana Delaney as Lois Lane when she's being interviewed, and Lois is kind of not so subtly kind of prodding and sort of making fun of her, and her sort of very self-righteous, over the top reactions to that to those remarks. I think that's probably when the most fun comes. So it's one of those things where it started feeling maybe too over the top and too broad for me, but the more we kind of learned about who she is as a character, the more I feel like the performance fit it, if that makes sense.
No, I'm with you. Yeah, it was very over the top at first. And I think that's the whole thing, is that she's a fish out of water. It's, she's not supposed to really, she's not really supposed to be very subtle, I guess. She's clearly she's a military woman. She comes out expecting to sort of be, once she realizes that the human race is inferior to the Kryptonian race on this Earth, that she sort of expects to be acknowledged as more powerful, and is relishing the fact that she's finally has this taste of power that she's been longing for such a long time, only for it to backfire, and then for her to sort of have to try and subtly keep it under wraps in order for her plan to, either go free Jax-Ur or to try and coerce Superman into coming to her, or coming to her side of things, till seeing things from her point of view. I think that subtlety plays, but then the fact that she's not subtle at all, and that she's just this linebacker of a human being that's just, rock and roll, just bam, breaking through doors, tearing roofs off of cars immediately, shaking guys down, and just really enjoying the fact that she's this overpowered creature that's able to potentially rule over this group of people at long last. I think the voice does match up pretty well with it when you look at what the character is supposed to be. It is a little bit coming out of the gate that strong and that much. That does feel a little bit rough at first, but then once you realize what the character's arc is, and who the character really isn't ever set up to be this innocent, docile person, and there's no subtlety to her. It's just she's a Mack truck. She's gonna hit you, and she's not going to be subtle about it.
Yeah, totally agree. And again, her then getting to play off of course, Superman, we'll talk about in a second. But like I said, I think especially Dana Delaney is only in as Lois Lane is only in 2 scenes. She probably has less than 3 minutes of screen time in this episode, but she's so fun. Everything she says in this episode is funny.
I misunderstood Superman's role on Earth. I don't want to rule your planet. I only want to help people, as Superman himself has sworn to do.
Yeah, right. I'm Wonder Woman.
Excuse me?
Nothing. So tell me, are you guys an item?
No.
Yes.
It's not like that.
What? You'd spurn me? The last woman of your own kind? Oh, I see. You prefer the touch of these inferior creatures.
Hey, who are you calling inferior?
You've seen your last yellow sunrise, woman.
Mala!
Yeah, she's great. It's all subtle, mumbling under her breath, not believing who Mala is, not at all being not that Superman and Lois are a couple, but not at all intimidated by this woman, just not buying it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, not at all worried, not afraid to whisper under her breath. She makes the comment, yeah, and I'm Wonder Woman, which may or may not be, depending on if you believe the DCAU wiki's trivia factoid, whether or not it breaks continuity or not. But it's a funny line. She's very sarcastic in this episode, and really doesn't give much of a reaction to what's going on with this second Kryptonian showing up and potentially taking her spot away, and just not even feeling threatened one bit.
Yeah, it's a great deal of fun. And then, of course, as mentioned, we have Tim Daly as Superman again this week, and he does get a lot to do as far as we mentioned. He's sort of playing the hopeful to the point of almost naive, that he could sort of rehabilitate or train Mala to be to be his partner in crime fighting, and that he could kind of have an ally and somebody that would make him feel perhaps a little less alone. But to me, like the best bit is probably again after she has threatened Lois Lane's life, and he grabs her and he's trying to fly her back to the thing, and Mala's kind of scoffing at him that he cares about these these insignificant creatures, these humans, and says that Jaxer would have been so much more vicious and ruthless, and he just very matter-of-factly states, "I'm not Jaxer."
Huh. I think I found your weakness. You care about that twig.
I care about everyone, though you're pushing it right now.
If Jaxer were in your place, the planet would be ours by now.
I'm not Jaxer.
No, you aren't.
And I think that might be his best delivery in the episode. But it's a solid outing. He has to do a little bit of, again, the more hopeful side, and then there's him sort of reacting kind of like nervously and sheepishly to Mala's advances as they were, and then and at the end, kind of when it's time to get serious at the end there, I think he kind of brings it home pretty well there.
Yeah, I agree. I think that he has a lot of exposition to do outside of Corey Burton's Brainiac exposition. I think he's got most of the exposition and storytelling to do outside of as we kind of get a glimpse into him. I would have liked to have been able to see, and it's clearly not his fault, but story-wise, it would have been interesting to see him sort of struggle with the idea that we later see with him feeling lonely as the only surviving member of Krypton, a story that is told in almost every Superman medium here, but the idea that, hey, we might have to return this girl back to the Phantom Zone, and that's going to be hard for him to do because he was really hoping to have somebody else that understood. Like, we don't really get that aspect of Superman in this because Mala is quickly making a mess of things, and he's him sort of reacting to it. So it would have been interesting to hear that and hear how Mr. Daly would have delivered those lines. But I think for what we get in this episode, it's a strong outing from him and the rest of the cast. Even some of the players that don't get as much to do in the episode. So that's why I ended up giving, at least for part one here, I'm sitting at a 7 out of 10 for my voice acting.
Yeah, and I gave it the exact same score. So right now we are that I'm also sitting at the 7 out of 10. I think we got good building blocks here, and with a lot more Ron Perlman for next week's episode, and more Dana Delaney and more Tim Daly. I think this could be a recipe for the scores going up. Hopefully, fingers crossed. But we'll have to see when we come back to part 2.
Absolutely, looking forward to tackling that next week, Liam. So we will get our final scores for that week and tally everything up once we do get our final scores. So looking forward to that as we get together. But thank you everybody for tuning in for this week's episode. Don't forget, give us your thoughts on this format of breaking up the two-parters into multiple episodes. Do you like being able to sort of break down the episode a little bit more, hear our thoughts on it, and kind of sit in each part, or do you prefer when we combine them? Tweet us at DCAU Review, or head over to Instagram at DCAU Review and leave a comment on one of our posts there. I know there's a lot of uncertainty with the Twitter universe right now. So if you don't follow us on Instagram, head over there to at DCAU Review. We do we'll make an effort to do some more posting there and options for you to interact. And you can always leave a comment or send us a DM. Our DMs are open, so you can always send us a DM on there if you have thoughts or questions or any ideas that you want to share with us. But at DCAU Review on those formats is the best way to get in contact with us and interact. We would love your support of the podcast, and there are multiple ways that you can do that. You can, of course, subscribe to us on your favorite podcast app and leave a 5-star review. And if it allows you to leave a little paragraph about what you like, you could do that. You can also subscribe to us on the Pod Tower, as we mentioned. Head over to youtube.com/the Pod Tower and subscribe to that channel. Like our videos when we post them, comment on those videos. We appreciate the interaction there. If you want to support us monetarily, there are a few different options. There is a link at the bottom of our anchor.fm site that you can subscribe. If you want to tip us enough for a coffee every month or something like that, hey, we would appreciate that. There's a link there that you can do that. We appreciate those of you that do support us monetarily. And if you want to get something for your money instead of just giving us a coffee, head over to DCAUreview.com and check out the store tab. You can pick up a piece of merchandise if you'd like to and support us that way. Liam, as we've been talking about all episode, we are continuing next week with part 2 here. I'm excited to delve a little bit into the Jack Sir character. I think we mentioned last week, but we might have some time to discuss why these versions of the characters, as opposed to some of the maybe more well-known characters, adversaries of Superman with Kryptonian origins, were chosen. So looking forward to picking up this next week as we wrap up part 2 of Blasts from the Past.
Absolutely, it's gonna be fun, and yeah, definitely want to hear feedback. Again, whether you can DM us or leave a comment on our Insta, or you can still tweet us for now. So just let us know what you think of this format and what you think of this episode of Superman. And do you like this version of the Kryptonian in general? Do you like the Jack Sir character a little bit more? Do you wish it had stayed closer to him being sort of like an evil version of Jor-El? Would that have been more interesting than kind of mashing him into sort of a mixture of him and Zod? I'd like to hear people's perspectives on that as well. So definitely hit us up and let us know what you think, and then come back next week for the exciting conclusion.
Absolutely. Can't wait. But until then, I'm Cal.
And I'm Liam.
And we will talk to you on next week's episode of the DCAU Review.
To be continued.